it took us quite a while to even see the glimmer of the possibility of Cricut Press being a business.
We both had like day jobs doing graphic design work for companies in Lexington, and so we found ourselves like, you know, whenever I would close the door to my office, and you know, when nobody was around, I'd be working on these poster projects because I would have like several of them at a time, and it got to the point to where, you know, the nights that I had when I came home from work and the weekends weren't really enough time to get all of that done. So basically, this is what the image looks like when it's like the final design on the computer, but there's several other steps to get it to this point. And so what I've done is a lot of these are little drawings that I've sketched out on paper and inked and like scanned in and kind of cleaned them up on the computer. And this is the image when it's all separated out. But in order to break it down into the different colors, I have to separate what elements I want to be their own colors on the poster. And so I wasn't really, didn't really think I had the skills to be like a really good photographer. So I was just taking these random images and kind of wanting to work those into the mixed media pieces that I was doing, and found out that a lot of those guys like Rauschenberg would use screen printing to get their photographs into these huge, you know, collage pieces. So started getting interested in that, and kind of figuring out what I would need to do to learn that. I didn't have any classes or you know, formal training or anything like that in screen printing. So I kind of acquired all this equipment, but really hadn't actually done anything with it yet. So in each of these files, for each of these colors, I need to output those onto film. So for example, this orange color here, I have to take this separate file and output it onto a film that I can expose my screens with. So once it's printed out, that orange color ends up something like this, which I can then use to expose my screens. And that's how we end up with the screens that we print from. So you put your film down onto this green stuff that you see is the emulsion. And you put your film down and expose it to light. After a certain amount of time, you turn it off. That image is actually burned into that emulsion. And you spray it out, and you end up with your stencil that you can print from. Okay, so once the image is exposed onto the screen and you wash it out, this is what you end up with. And your ink passes through the open parts in the emulsion that washed out. And that's what gives you your image on your paper.
And then we met at UK taking photography classes. And I think we were both pretty good with being artistically productive after we both graduated. You were doing the paintings, but I was doing these mixed media boxes a la Joseph Cornell inspired pieces. And so I thought I could use the screen printing for those. But I don't think we ever used the screen printing for any of those mixed media pieces, because we just hit the ground running with poster art and never utilized it for anything else.
And it was about the same time that one of our friends here in town was in a band, and he knew that we were kind of getting into this and wanting to do the screen printing, and he was familiar with poster art and stuff, and he's like, hey, would you guys mind you know, designing a poster for this gig that we had coming up? They were playing a show in Cincinnati, and so he was, yeah, we'll give it a shot. So I just sort of like drew up a design, real simple. Still hadn't done any screen printing whatsoever, and figured that this would be a good jumping off point. We'll go ahead and just try it. And so I designed this poster, and Sarah helped me out, and we printed it. And I don't know,
it was a fast learning curve.
Yeah, we had no idea what we were doing, and
we were using a homemade table that you had built, and we hadn't bought the right screens, so we were making do with what we had.
Yeah, it was a lot of trial and error, but we finally got it, you know, something that we were happy with. And so that was our first poster. It was for a band, De Janeiro. And then, you know, they liked them so much, and apparently the posters did well for them that, you know, a couple weeks later when they had another gig, they asked us if we would mind doing another poster for them. So I think Sarah did the next poster.
Yeah.
So our second poster was also for De Janeiro, and just kind of took off from there.
But I do think we each have our own strengths. I think Brian is so much better at hand lettering than I am. But then I tend to do more figurative drawings. Like I like to add people and I guess animals and things like that more in my pieces than Brian does.
You have a more illustrative style, and mine is a little bit more rough and abstract.
So that's how we kind of divvy up projects too. When a client approaches us, depending on what they want, is who's going to be stronger for the project. And a lot of times people will come to us and they've picked out a handful of posters from our site and say, I like these, and if most of them are mine, or most of them are Brian's, directs who gets that job. So I'd say out of all the years, we've only collaborated on 2 or 3 pieces.
We still see ourselves as having 2 very separate styles, but sometimes when we talk to clients or people that are familiar with our work, they have no idea that there's a difference. But they don't know that Sarah does posters and I do posters. They just assume that we somehow come together and create them together, or it's just one of us. And I look back on it, and there are some things where I'm like, yeah, I guess we did. Our styles did sort of tend to kind of look alike there for a little bit. We still maintain that we have very distinctive, styles for each of our work.
I think though, when you're working with somebody for so long, and you're so close, there's no way you get around having similar.
Yeah, because definitely
aesthetics.
things that you will do will rub off on me, and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah, because we used to say all the time that if there was a girl in a poster, it was mine. If there was a bike in a poster, it was his. But over the last year, I've started doing a lot of bike posters. So now you got to start doing some girl posters.
I can't draw people very well at all.
Screen printing ink rests on the surface of paper, while letterpress ink gets pushed into the paper. You just add a dollop of ink to your palette there, and the trick is to just get it really smooth to where it's coating the whole surface. And if you need to apply more, then we'll apply more. So now you've got your palette with your printing block locked in. You just apply that, and that applies the ink. So we'll just coat that a couple times. And I've already got this lined up, but you just give a good impression, and then it coats it, so it's self-coating. And so these are just little pieces that we add to all our handmade items. We've got to reprint these at least once a year, so we do a bunch of them. It takes a couple days, depending on the weather, for these to dry, that type of ink. So we'll just sit it out, and boop.
We started working, out of our home because it was really, it was all that we knew, and it worked for us. And we had basically converted every little space in our house that where we didn't eat or sleep, into some type of workspace. And it got kind of crazy. People would come into our house, and it was like, this room is completely chock full of paper and inks, and this other room is for cleaning all that stuff up and shipping and all that. And it was a little overwhelming, and we've always said that it'd be nice to have our own kind of separate space where we can kind of have a distinction between our home and the work that we do as Cricut Press. And
I think it's hard to explain to some people who might want to come by and see your studio, see you work, see your actual post or your portfolio, and even meet with you to talk about a job, and you have to make those boundaries where this is our personal home, and we can't really be inviting everybody into it. So yeah, right from the beginning we knew we wanted a space that we could provide all those things, but of course real estate is always expensive. So we decided to wait until the perfect fit came along, and I think this really works for us because we didn't really want what was called a storefront, something that needed to be open all the time. We just wanted it to be a place where we could meet people when they wanted to meet and work when we needed to work. So our studio is part of what's called the Bread Box, which it used to be a Rainbow Bread company, but recently been bought, and I mean, just so huge and so full of potential. And we were lucky enough to get a space over with a bunch of other artists in what is already an established built space.
But yeah, the idea behind this building is that, this building is so huge that, if we can get a community of businesses that are really diverse and it kind of feeds, everybody can kind of feed off the energy of everybody else in the building. And it looks like it's well on its way to doing that. I mean, I've always been into bikes and riding bikes and working on them, and there was a time where I had probably more than I should have, of sort of a small collection of bikes, but tried to whittle that down here in the past few years. But yeah, it's just something that it's always really interested me, and I think that there for a while I started just doing really expressive drawings of bikes. I sort of approached it the way people would like human faces. It's like I could draw them in such a way to where there's so many different styles of bicycles that they each sort of, they can take on their own kind of whimsical characteristics. And so I started doing a lot of illustration like that, and that led to, people noticing, hey, there's these, this guy draws these really cool little bikes. And so we started getting asked to do a lot of work for local bike events and Bike Lexington. We've done pretty much all the graphic work for them, since almost since the beginning of that event back in 2005. So yeah, so that's led to a lot of different bike organizations and companies approaching us for that type of work. So that's been really cool to be able to mesh, something that you like doing outside of art with your art.
We like to tell a lot of beginning artists, we try to fit in as much of our own work as possible whenever we have spare time. And I think a lot of that passion that goes into your own work attracts and invites work that you want to do for clients. And so it's in my opinion that you should always try to do your own work, because not only is it going to lead to some good things, but that passion and that really shines through, I think.
We get a lot of emails and, from like people who are like design students or the printmaking students, and they're interested in what it takes to be a poster artist. And usually, I mean, the first answer, my first response is usually you got to be ready to put in a lot of work. I mean, it takes a lot of work, and it's still very, very hard. Of all the poster artists out there, I can count on 3 fingers, the artists who make their living just off doing concert posters alone.
I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, you have to really diversify, what you do. It's like you don't just do poster art, you also have to do design, illustration, kind of like, give a good variety of your talents. And pretty much, every spare moment that you have, be thinking about that and working on it. And you got to be willing to also, make those connections. You can't work in a vacuum. You have to sort of be reaching out to people who might be able to, present you with an opportunity, or establish those friendships and social connections that that you can potentially be able to get work out of in the future.
I think maybe one bit of advice to younger artists is don't get discouraged by maybe the length of time it takes to make it a career. You don't want to be discouraging, but you also don't want to rush, in my opinion. And that's the case where you do your own work. You try to do your own work as much as possible and as many client jobs as you can, and hopefully that will lead to work that pays. My typical emotion is anxiety that I'm not going to have enough time on this earth to do as much as I want to do. That's my typical emotion.
And there's times when you know, every artist goes through this periods of not feeling entirely confident about what they're doing, or feeling this you know, little bit of self-consciousness, and especially if you're working on a lot of projects and it feels like what you're doing just isn't really you know, working out.
You got to just be willing to make it your lifestyle and love it.
But I mean, we're really impressed by, you know, the amount of jobs we've been able to get here and how supportive you know, people are of the work that we do. So that's been really encouraging, and it helps us feel a little bit more part of this community. Like we're actually like, you know, we've actually done something to make this a more interesting place to live. That you know, that our stuff is out there and people are talking about it. So that's pretty encouraging.